Speaker. Bravo indeed. Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to say what a privilege and honour it is to get up here today and speak on behalf of the great people of the District of Lake Melville. Mr. Speaker, they certainly have put their faith in me time and time again, and I answer the call as best I can whenever I can, Mr. Speaker. It's truly my honour to represent them in this honourable House. Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to step back in time to last week just a little bit here and recognise the volunteers, as so many other of my colleagues in this honourable House have done, being National Volunteer Week last week. And specifically, I want to talk about the Labrador Winter Games really quickly here, Mr. Speaker. We had about 500 volunteers come out in aid of the games, support of the games, which represents probably around 6.5% of the total population of Happy Valley Goose Bay, Mr. Speaker. So that speaks to the backbone of our community, where people are willing to go over and above and step outside their normal lives in order to support a worthwhile cause, to support athletes, and to support the games in Labrador, Mr. Speaker. It's a wonderful thing indeed. Mr. Speaker, in talking about the budget here, I'd just like to first start off with a few things about Labrador, and I'd like to say when it comes to the completion of the Trans-Labrador Highway, Mr. Speaker, we've got the additional $39 million allocated to complete Phase 1 of the Trans-Labrador Highway, Mr. Speaker. An absolutely wonderful, wonderful initiative. And I'll just say this much, Mr. Speaker, as a young boy out hunting on the land with my father, both in the winter and in the summer. In the winter time, we would go out on that road. It was inaccessible by vehicle all winter long, and we have a long, brutal winter in Labrador, as many of the people in the House know, everybody in Labrador certainly knows. We used to go by Skidoo, go up caribou hunting, partridge hunting, do a little bit of trapping, Mr. Speaker. It was simply inaccessible. And I remember riding on the back of a snowmobile with my father, looking down over the sides of these ravines, really steep drops, Mr. Speaker. Beautiful country nonetheless, but it gives you an idea. So we're stepping back 25 years or so, Mr. Speaker, and it's just unimaginable about how far we've come since that time, Mr. Speaker. And I'd also like to talk about the summertime as well, because as a young boy I remember going up the Trans-Labrador Highway, what we used to refer to as Churchill Road at the time. And Mr. Speaker, it was a wood path at that time. We used to go towards the culverts, which we would see nowadays. Those were wooden bridges, some of them quite rickety. We would have to take great caution and great care to go over some parts of those crossings of the streams, the brooks, what have you, Mr. Speaker. And even then, it took such a long time to get anywhere, and it was pretty perilous. Even recently, like when I came home around 2003, when I moved back from Ontario, I remember showing back up in Labrador, and of course we engaged in the same hunting, the same traditional use of the land, and there wasn't much difference at that time, Mr. Speaker. But since I returned home in 2003, I've got to see major, major improvements in our road, Mr. Speaker. At that time, it was unimaginable that we would even have a South Coast Road going down connecting Cartwright to the Lake Melville area, Mr. Speaker. And we can see through this budget as well, Mr. Speaker, and through that joint federal commitment with our government, the federal government, of the $85 million, we're going to begin to widen and prepare that southern road as well, Mr. Speaker. A wonderful opportunity to connect communities, good for tourism, good for business, and good for people connecting with their loved ones that happen to be on the island portion of the province as well. As I've said many times in this House, my father-in-law lives on the Northern Peninsula. We've driven that road many times, and that is going to be quite a spectacle when it's done.
Well said, well said.
Absolutely. I'm certainly proud, Mr. Speaker, a very proud Labradorian, proud of where we've come from, proud of where we are today under the leadership of our Premier in this government.
Hear, hear.
And I am absolutely stoked, if you will, Mr. Speaker, about where we're heading in terms of Labrador. As a young kid who grew up in Goose Bay, we certainly had, at that time, nothing more than a base town, if you will, a military town. Everybody who worked in the town was employed on the base, my father included. And interesting enough, my son just did a Heritage Fair project about the base, and it dawned on him that his existence, my existence, was dependent on that base. It was the main employer. My grandparents came down from the north. My other grandparents on my father's side came from the island. They met up there, and that resulted in me. And then having me there, and my son then realizes that his mom, from the Northern Peninsula as well, came to Goose Bay to work on that very same base, and resulted in his existence. So it was great for him to have the realization of the importance of the base, where it came from, where we're headed with that base, and what it means to people in terms of having jobs and being able to sustain themselves and have disposable income for their families and make themselves make their lives there, Mr. Speaker. But if you look at Happy Valley Goose Bay and Lake Melville today, and because of the leadership, the determination of this government to do right by the people of Labrador, and not merely have just sessions of lip service to the people of Labrador. In Happy Valley Goose Bay, Mr. Speaker, we have fibre optic running through our community. We have a brand new high school, we have a brand new hospital, we have a brand new long-term care facility, Mr. Speaker, we have sewage treatment plant about to come on stream, Mr. Speaker. These are things that we couldn't have dreamed of back in Happy Valley Goose Bay as we were growing up, and to come to that realization of where we're heading, and to see what the potential of Labrador is, and especially in Central Labrador, is simply amazing. If I could step back to one of those hunting trips, Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you something that really important that happened to me. As my father and I were out hunting in the woods, we came across an abandoned core shack, and it dawned on me, and I asked my father, well, what's in that core shack? And we went in, we saw the old abandoned core samples, and back in that day, it was just unfathomable to realize how they got a drill rig even in there. So it must have been slung in by a helicopter, and but for a young man to see what people were doing, how they were drilling into the earth, taking samples, measuring that up against state claims, and then eventually to where we're headed today in that same region with companies like Labrador Iron Mines, Mr. Speaker, we have the ability to start looking forward at Muskrat Falls and the employment that brings and the power that that's going to push out in order to facilitate further mining developments. The future is limitless for us in Labrador, Mr. Speaker, and I'm proud to walk the path with this government that's going to see us realize our hopes and our dreams of having a lot of industry, a lot of opportunity for jobs, and a lot of the affluence that comes with those opportunities, Mr. Speaker. So just to talk a little bit more about Labrador, we've got a total investment of the road, which has been the centre of my first few minutes here, Mr. Speaker, a total commitment up to this point of $450 million on that piece of infrastructure. I think one of the largest in our province's history, Mr. Speaker. It is something to really be proud of. And as somebody who has driven it as a youth, who has driven it as a hockey coach and a father when I came back to the province in 2003, and then to see it now every day when we cross over to Lab West and to visit my colleague in Lab West, Minister of Service Newfoundland and Labrador and Labrador Affairs, and to go to those hockey tournaments, to bring the kids over a safe road in time that didn't take, it doesn't take 11, 12 hours anymore. You can do it in 6 or 7 hours. It's phenomenal, phenomenal, Mr. Speaker. But this government has also shown a commitment over and above these blue PC districts, Mr. Speaker. And I'll talk a little bit about what's going on in some of the rural districts, and I hope the third party is certainly listening. This is a government, through our Premier and our Cabinet and our team of dedicated colleagues over here, we do what's right by the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. So we're not rewarding those districts that have chosen us on this side of the House to represent them, but we do what's right. And I just want to list some of those, Mr. Speaker. We've got $4 million committed to continue the work, the construction of a new arena in Makovic, Mr. Speaker, a place where I have blood ties as well. That's in the district of our friend across the way from Torngat Mountains. Mr. Speaker, we've got $1.5 million allocated to continue the work towards a multi-purpose facility in Hopedale. And I've been in that community a lot, Mr. Speaker, and I'll tell you what, it's certainly needed. And that comes down to this government it's about service to the people. It's about addressing the needs. It's not about political patronage and rewarding those, like I said, those loyal districts. It's about doing what's right. It's about putting the money where it's needed, where it's going to do the most good for the kids, for the elders, and for the people in those communities. I'm certainly proud to be a part of that. Just a couple of more from Labrador, if you will, Mr. Speaker. $3.9 million to rebuild classroom and administrative spaces in Charlottetown, Mr. Speaker. A wonderful initiative as well, sorely needed. And $3 million to support the ongoing environmental remediation of the former U.S. military site in Hopedale, and that makes, I guess, it builds up to our third year now, which is a total of $6.3 million in that commitment, Mr. Speaker. I've walked that hill. I've witnessed that site with my very own eyes, Mr. Speaker, and we are to be commended for reaching out and making sure that we deal with that particular situation. Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to go on and address some of the concerns, if I will, about some of the comments we've heard from across the way from the third party. And I'll quote one of the members over there, Mr. Speaker, from across the way, saying that Budget 2013 is bankrupt of ideas. Bankrupt of ideas that lends to diversification of the revenue streams coming into the government and into this great province, Mr. Speaker. That just blows my mind. It just blows my mind. We have the oil revenue, yes we do. We're talking about aquaculture. We're talking about hydroelectric developments, fabrication, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about facilitating a new way of life for Labrador, and this is how I'm going to put it. If I had to look into the future and if someone had to ask me, well, Mr. Russell, what would you like to see in Labrador? I'll tell you what I would like to see. I'd like to see all communities connected by roads, therefore alleviating the pressure on marine services and the isolation that comes with that, which means cheaper goods and services. It means people being able to open up their communities to further tourism efforts. You talk about that in conjunction with the fact that this government, we put forward legislation to make sure that when power is available and we're ready to move on new mining developments. Imagine a scenario, Mr. Speaker, where we had 6 or 7 new developments. 6 or 7 new mining developments with the jobs that comes with that under new royalty regimes that are more beneficial to the people of this province and to our general revenue funds. And together with all of that, we look at the ability for us to begin to train our people for these jobs, these long-term jobs, these mining efforts that are going to last decades and decades and decades. And if you were to look at all of those things together, Mr. Speaker, and then our new pricing that we can have on industrial power, I mean, with the 2 major developments right now in Lab West, the antiquated, formula for power there is going to change. We have to come up on stream with those, the competitive pricing within Quebec, because let's face it, I mean, when you're talking about the Central Mineral Belt, it extends right through into Labrador, into Quebec. And when it comes to diversification, this leads to a point that our Minister of Finance talked about, several times, every time he's gotten up to speak. And it talks about fiscal flexibility. Fiscal flexibility not only in the form of having to deal with unanticipated, fluctuations in the volatility of oil pricing or, God forbid, disasters, but also flexibility to deal with new opportunities such as new oil and gas developments, new mines. We have to put our eggs in several different baskets, if you will, Mr. Speaker, in order for us to be able to capitalize on opportunities as they emerge. That's responsible governments, that's visionary governments, and under the leadership of our Premier, this team over here, we're going to make sure we're ready to capitalize on all these opportunities in the best interest of the people of the province, Mr. Speaker. It comes down to, I guess, we've heard it many times in this House about living within our means. And, I mean, when expenditures surpass our revenues, we have to adjust. And of course, a lot of us in this House have felt the sting of cuts, of layoffs and stuff like that. And, nobody is certainly happy to make those decisions. But we walk a path on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, where we're prepared to make the tough call, the hard decision in the best interest of the people of the province. And we could have taken the easy way out. We could have simply went, spent, borrowed a little more, and then went for, the political favor that comes with that. And I'm certainly sure that would have been reflected in the polls, but personally I don't take too much stock in them anyway. But when it comes to living within our means and addressing our debt situation, Mr. Speaker, we've heard the Minister of Finance and many other of our honourable colleagues in this House get up and talk about the servicing cost of that debt of between $800 and $880 million, almost $1 billion to service the debt. There is a significant opportunity cost associated with that. It's as simple as this. That's money that's not available for programs and services. This is something that has been addressed, and I'm proud to say that we have addressed the debt to the tune of over $4 billion since we've taken office, Mr. Speaker, and that's no small feat indeed. When you look at it very briefly, and I'll just say, if you had a credit card in your own personal household, to the people out at home that are watching, if you rack that up, you max that out, you get to a point where you're paying on the interest, you don't hit the principal anymore. You're simply not going to be able to do all the things in life that you want to do. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. Those sacrifices either come in recreation, it either comes in entertainment, it comes in support of your children, their extracurricular activities, and God forbid it gets to a point where it comes down to the running of your household and you have to make decisions which come down to the food, to things like the basic necessities such as food, Mr. Speaker, and utilities. We have to be responsible. This province has to be run like a corporation that is responsible to its shareholders. In essence, we have to be responsible to the people, the taxpayers, the voters, Mr. Speaker, those that we are servicing. This is their money. We have to make sure that we do our very best in order to service the people that are all part of this, Mr. Speaker. When I talk about the debt, we've heard the NDP say many times, you know, they're not interested in taking surpluses when they come and putting those on the debt. Mr. Speaker, we have done that time and time again, and yes, when it comes to all of the money we spent on the debt and the money we've spent in the past on infrastructure, those were necessary. You have to strike while the iron is hot. We had the money at that time. We've all heard mention of the crumbling infrastructure we've inherited as a government when we came in 2003. We have made gigantic strides in upping the quality of life of the people of this province by our dedication to doing right by them and addressing the infrastructure needs, Mr. Speaker, and I'm certainly proud to be a part of that. We've also heard of the, I guess, the people from across the way and their methodology of how we would do all of those wonderful social things that they seem to want to have, such as, you know, the universal health care, the dental, the housing for everybody. We've heard of the chicken in every pot and 13 in every dozen. Tax, and spend, tax and spend. That would put us into a vicious cycle, Mr. Speaker, which will basically, I don't think we'd be able to recover from. And in getting up and saying that time and time again, they set or send a very dangerous message to the people out there in terms of having a sense of entitlement, in terms of that everybody deserves all this stuff. I say to the people of the province, and I think we're here as a government to foster development, industry, to get jobs for people, Mr. Speaker, to have mega projects and smaller projects as necessary in order to provide for the people of the province. They have to meet us halfway. You want to get out there, you want to become educated, you want to get a job, you want to buy a house, you want to do those things, come see us. Come see your MHA. We'll help meet you halfway. We'll get out there and beat the grass with you, and we'll get her done. Mr. Speaker, I'll just finish off with the last few minutes that I've got talking about Muskrat Falls specifically. We've heard mention from the official opposition about, you know, we've got all these people coming from away, coming from Newfoundland to take our jobs, all of this stuff, Mr. Speaker. I say to the people at home, we're in the very preliminary stages of this project. We have a long way to go. By summer, we're going to see the number of people on site doubled. There are going to be a lot of jobs for a lot of people who are interested, but again, meet us halfway. Come see us. Come help us meet those contractors. Come help us connect with the unions. And by the way, good point too, because everybody who's a member of the union or wants to be in order to get one of those jobs, you should know that the people from across the way, they didn't want you there. Neither one of them. They didn't want you there. They didn't vote for this project. So when you think about that as you're connecting with the unions and connecting with the contractors, you just remember that this government we stood tall, we stood firm, we pushed for this project. They voted against it. Simple as that. Simple as that. Mr. Speaker, I've only got a couple of seconds left, and I'll use this time, I guess, to close and just draw a little bit of comparison, I guess, about the difference between us over here on the governing side and on the third party. When you talk about us and what we want to do, we want to make sure that we have the money to spend on infrastructure, to spend on people's educations, to make sure that we keep the classroom sizes up there, we keep the teachers there. We want to make sure people's quality of life is enhanced. We want to build industry, and we want people to benefit from that and become a part of it. We talk about aquaculture, research, mega developments, hydroelectric development, mining, fabrication, Mr. Speaker. And what do you get when you look at the third party? Well, let's talk shrimp shells, wood pellet-fired electrical generation, and simply the, and I'll say it, Mr. Speaker, the double-crossing of all of those that have went into business with us in good faith in the oil business, Mr. Speaker. We're not prepared to do that. We're here for the people, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.